Good evening, everyone. This is Aditya Ravichandar, chairperson of Sensors NIDPC. I'm happy to welcome you all for Sensors 2020. Sensors is the national level annual technical symposium conducted by the Department of Instrumentation and Control Engineering from the National Institute of Technology, Trichy. Sensors aims to facilitate learning through informative guest lectures to give students an aptitude in various subjects and skills. We conduct such events such as workshops and competitions that put students to challenge their technical knowledge. We start off this 24th edition with a series of webinars from highly distinguished personalities working in various fields who have amazing things to share about their life experiences. Today, I'd like to welcome the chief guest for the day, Mr. Saiman Shetty, to the wonderful audience present here. Mr. Simon is an entrepreneur, engineer, and much more. Aside from founding several companies, he was a powertrain engineer at Tesla and technical manager at Lyft. Currently, he is a co-founder of resumepuppy.com and technical manager at Neuro. Neuro is a company that works with self-driving cars. Also, I'd like to thank the support given by our department faculties to arrange such a meeting, especially Dr. Uma, who's our head of the department, who was giving major support in arranging this session. A very good morning to you, sir. And on behalf of National Institute of Technology, Trichy, we welcome you. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This is wonderful, and thanks for having me as a guest. I'm excited to talk to you all about different stuff. So
That's nice. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Pranay and Nathaniel Nirmal, who will be taking the session forward. Over to you, Pranay.
Hello. A very good morning, sir. I'm Pranay, and this is my partner Nathaniel.
hey guys,
Hello, sir.
can you hear me fine?
Yeah, sir. We can hear you. You're fine.
Okay,
Yes.
sounds good. Yeah, let's move ahead.
Okay. So the first question: what kind of student were you at VTU, and what differences do you see in yourself since then?
What kind of student? So one of the things I remember as a student is that I was actually a little more inclined towards the practical side of things, not necessarily like the labs that came for grades, not necessarily that, but it was more of like we had I remember we had a professor who was very big on like us doing projects, but without with I mean not for grades, right? And he would never keep these projects for grades. He would always be like, okay, I'm going to help you, I'm going to support you for every project that you do, any project that you want to do, but I'm not going to give you any grades for it. So that kind of kept us motivated to do stuff without necessarily it being for the grade. So long story short, that helped me sort of get that practical bent of mind. Let's spend those long hours in the labs after the classes, and that's during my early days, during the early days of my sort of undergrad. Since then, I got exposed to this whole lab environment, and I remember building a Tesla coil, like a few other projects, and it was super fun. We used to stay back long after the classes were over, and our professor somehow managed to let the security people keep the college open and the lab open. So yeah, that's how I mean, I was very much. I would rather, probably it's not the right audience to tell this, but I would rather spend a lot of time in the lab after classes doing fun stuff than like in the class and in the regular lab sessions. So that was how I was inclined back then. And how do I find the how do I find education different over here compared to back in India? I don't. So yeah, there is definitely a good amount of difference from the way it is structured, right? Like the way professors are given extreme autonomy to define whatever they want as the curriculum for that subject, and also the grades and the examination style and everything like that. So I see that extreme autonomy creating room for the professor to be innovative and give and like mold the courses dynamically, right, as the years roll by, than to wait for approvals or things like that. But apart from that fact, and apart from the fact that there's like infrastructure like labs and everything easily and quickly accessible, I don't see that's like huge differences. It's just these fundamental differences that have large like downstream effects that create um, a big difference, I think.
Oh, that's great, sir. It's good to know that you were indulged in projects that were not graded and stuff like that. So the next question, like, what to you is the most exciting aspect about college? Like, how did it vary between your undergrad and your postgrad studies?
You mean most exciting stuff about my undergrad, or?
Yeah, both. Like, how did it vary between your undergrad and your postgrad?
Okay, so the most interesting thing about my graduate school, right, like which is postgrad, was that so I came here to study control systems, and that's what courses I took and stuff like that. But then there was this culture shift as well, right? This culture shift that I was going through to understand different sort of different styles of learning and all of that. So at that time, what happened was there's this university, right? And then there's a ton of classes in the university. Pretty much every discipline, every field known to humankind was being taught on that campus, right? And understanding that fact baffled me, because I was I kind of was in engineering before that for the most part, but then this was a chance for me to say, okay, so what exists beyond engineering, right? Like, okay, in theory, we as engineers, we sort of learn a bunch of engineering and then just apply engineering in its purest form, right? Like, we don't necessarily think more towards the design angle, more towards like market viability and the business side. So this opened up an opportunity for me to randomly just crash into some classes and then just listen to stuff. I remember, like, I used to so the good part over there is that none of those counted towards grades, because I didn't take those classes for credit. So all I would do is like look up the course catalog of the entire university, look at what classes are being taught at what time. Then, except for my regular classes, which is um like I think it was 6 to 8 hours a week or something like that. Apart from that, I would mark my calendar about all these other classes that were going on, and then I would crash into them. And some of them were extremely boring for me, right? Like, for me as a person, there were classes, some fine arts kind of classes that were extremely boring. So I did attend one or two of them, and then I discontinued. I spent those time. I really was interested in design, and like design thinking, also the business things where there's the marketing, and there's also like product side. There I did attend a couple classes in finance, which kind of bored me. So basically my approach there was like, I would attend all these classes. Whichever bored me, I would just cross it off my list. Anyway, I'm not taking credit for it, so that went. I replaced it with classes that were interesting. And then suddenly my entire campus life over there was extremely busy, because I would attend all these classes which I didn't take. But at the same time, it would become extremely enriching, And that gave me a lot of holistic perspective about, okay, so all these boundaries between disciplines are something that humans created, right? I mean, obviously all these disciplines are also something humans created, but then all these boundaries don't necessarily need to be there in our brains. We can basically think about market viability while we are doing engineering design. We can think about the artistic side of products while we are doing engineering design. So that's what opened that up, and that was really sort of enlightening experience for me.
Yeah, sir. I love it how your curiosity was met by the standards of ASU. And so I'll take it to the next question. So, what was your journey VTU to ASU? So, can you describe about that?
So I'm sorry, can you be a little more specific? By journey, you mean what kind of?
Like, why specifically did you apply for ASU?
Okay. So so it was clear to me that I wanted to study control systems. Now that's a relatively long story about why I wanted to study control systems. But I did my bachelor's in electrical and electronics. Became apparent that I wanted to study control systems. Then I was looking for colleges that specialized in had a good control system program and had good control systems professors. That's what I was looking for, right? I was looking for that. There was Arizona State University that came up quite a bit, and also a particular professor in Arizona State University who played a huge role in my understanding of things as well. His name is Armando Rodriguez, and he has a very interesting personal side of the story about being the son of immigrants and then working up harsh conditions in the US. That's the personal side. But then he went to MIT, got his PhD from MIT, and then he is one of the most interesting people I have met. Not only because of the technical acumen that he has, right? It's one thing to be a great technologist and understand things, have a PhD and everything, and it's a totally different thing to be a great educator and to have that art of imparting education to people, right? In a way that they find amusing, in a way that they are able to understand well, and also retain and apply, right? So this professor is a rare sort of person who has all of these qualities in the same proportion, right? He would come to class in soccer wear. All I remember from his class are all the fun we had, all the jokes he made and everything. But then at the same time, there were all these concepts he was trying to convey from using that approach, right? His videos are available online. You can go check on YouTube as well, and you'll know what I mean. But yeah, he actually received, just naming a few accolades, he received the Presidential Medal for Excellence in Science and Technology Education from President Clinton. And he sits on several government committees in determining weapons technology and aerospace, stuff like that. Along with that, he also does research in how do we better the education system. It's not necessarily just technical research he does. He also does research in the education part of things, right? How do we develop better tools to impart STEM education to students in this day and age, right? Leveraging all the technologies that we have. So yeah, if there was one main reason why I went to ASU, it was Dr. Rodriguez. But then there are several more reasons about the diversity at ASU. Also, it just all added up.
Great, sir. That's good.
Yeah.
Find such a mentor. So the next question, like as you've studied in VTU and in ASU, like what do you think we need to do to improve the educational experience in Indian colleges?
I think so. It's again, it's been around. I think what it's been around 7 years since I graduated my undergrad in India. So I'm sure that a lot of things have changed, and I do talk to my own professors back in college, and I see students as well come out of these colleges, which are good, right? It's I think the things are headed for the better in terms of bringing innovation in Indian education system. But in general, right, and this is not just for Indian education system, in general, for any education system, what I would recommend is to necessarily impart knowledge which is usable, right? Like, okay, let's say there is some sort of okay, let's say there's the concepts of EMI that's being discussed, right? I'm just giving an example. Electromagnetic induction. So I've come across several products where EMI becomes an issue when the product is out, especially self-driving vehicles, especially any vehicle, especially self-driving vehicles, where there's a lot of EMI interference. The signals get mixed up, and the vehicle doesn't perform well on the road, right? So these are all because of very basic electromagnetic interference concepts that we have studied way back in engineering, in even in our bachelor's. But if this is what I think, if I was able to relate better to such problems back then, right? It would have been better for me to not just understand that concept, but also the concepts around it, right? So there's a premise laid, and then as we progress in the subject, there's so much built on top of it, right? If that premise itself is not understood in spirit and in practicality, then everything built on top of it becomes looser and looser, right? Versus if this is strong and if it's demonstrated probably in the lab in some manner, right? Okay, it's not just the display of let's say some interference patterns on an oscilloscope, by making some electromagnetic waves incident on a wire, but it's more of like, okay, what does this mean in real life? Why does this create a problem? And when harnessed right, how is it a really powerful thing, right? If this is known well, then everything that we teach on top of that makes more and more sense, and it solidifies the basic concept. Versus if it is not, then it makes less and less sense, and then people either get fed up, or the whole concept loses meaning, including the basics, right? So this is where I think having extremely result driven, like industry result driven sort of approach, I think is the best. There are some people who argue, is it good to have a research oriented approach or an industry oriented approach, right? So I agree, most of the activity that happens in a university setting is inclined towards research, but then most of the crowd is the crowd that goes into industry, right? Where there is an imbalance. If you impose a lot of like research driven approach in university, I think that is a disservice to the world out there and the demand of the world out there that is needed of that institution. So yeah, I think yeah, that's extremely practical approach is what I would recommend.
Thank you. And as team, we also make academic suggestions to the professors, and I think this would be one of the things which we would recommend to the professors, because I think this makes a lot of sense. And moving on to the next question, what were some of the biggest cultural and academic changes that you had to make after moving to the USA?
I think I did address the academic changes side fairly decently. Let me look at the cultural side, right? There were few things professionally as well as personally that were different culturally, right? I feel like, you know, the I feel like in general in the US, the group intelligence. So there is something called an individual intelligence and a collective intelligence, right? So and that differs in different cultures, and cultures have a lot to do with this as well, right? So it is a person smart by themselves, and then does a group become smarter even if the person is not smart by themselves, right? So I feel like in the US the culture, and I'm using US as a proxy for this because I don't necessarily know how it is in Europe or any other countries. It's not me professing US over them. It's just I don't know, right? But I know about the US. So what I see, my personal opinion, is that when a bunch of people come together, there's fair amount of attention paid into how to make that system work, right? How do you make the end result of a collection of people more than the sum of their individual parts, right? And then you have a very, very cohesive team that can move mountains, right? And the intricate attention paid in extremely good companies that have created world-changing impact in the US on that aspect of culture within the company, how teams work, how do you identify when something is not working and pivot and correct that, right? That is something I think has unlocked a lot of potential.
Yes, sir. Like many of us would be going for hires, like many of them in the audience. So it is good to know that such things, like what are the major differences that are happening in US. So next question, like to what extent do you think a master's degree aids in accelerating one's career? Like, does it have the same impact compared to say 5 years ago?
So okay, so there's two approaches to look at this, right? Like one is how much does it increase your exposure, and how much does it increase your knowledge. So from a knowledge standpoint, I think, like, as sitting on the hiring side, if I'm hiring someone on a team or for a role, then I personally don't necessarily see if the person has a master's degree. I mean, even if the person, this might be slightly controversial, but even if the person doesn't have a bachelor's degree, I mean, what I look for is them satisfying a certain level of competency required for that role, right? And everything else becomes secondary. Uh, that's the approach I use. That's the approach many people use. But then there's a very Silicon Valley kind of side also. When I speak, probably I am imbibing a lot of like Silicon Valley culture versus the rest of the US or the rest of the way things work here, right? In the rest of the US or the rest of the world. When it comes to master's program accelerating someone's career, I think if used right, it will. But then through my experience, I can say that a really well set workplace that pushes you to do your best might have the potential to teach you much more than what a master's program would do in those 1.5 or 2 years, whatever it is.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, as this was like one of the biggest questions which people asked. So going on to the next question, what were your biggest takeaways from ASU apart from academics?
Yeah, apart from academics, I think Well, it was the first time I was. There's certain elements of these cultural aspects that were different, right? I think it was a good trial ground to experience like workplace dynamics and things like that. So I think apart from academics and also all the friends that I made at ASU, obviously, and all that stuff. So I think, yeah, in general, I think I think 1.5 years after which I actually moved out of Arizona and started working. So those 1.5 years were bittersweet. They were a time of like big change, but also at the same time they were a time of like extreme, probably like learning per unit time was highest during that time.
Yes, sir. That's something really interesting. Moving on to the next question, like how did you prepare yourself to get into a massive company like Tesla? Like how important was the support you received from others?
So, coming to preparation, I think it was mostly like I was working in a company in Atlanta, which had it was not necessarily automotive, but then the application of robotics and what I did at Tesla, that was most of it was what I was doing for that company as well, right? And I think that helped. That experience sort of laid the foundation for me to have the knowledge for that specific role at Tesla that came up, and yeah, and it's basically like one thing led to the other. The people were like looking for a controls engineer at Tesla because they were growing their team in the Model S and X operations, but then I was like basically contacted by a recruiter randomly one day, and I basically there was a lot of conversations in between about like different things when it comes to either like the role or also like I had to make this move to Silicon Valley and things like that. There are logistical issues as items that we discussed as well, but then yeah, in general that's basically how it went.
And the next question, sir. What kind of software applications did you develop for the process automation Model X and X when you were working in Tesla?
So one thing I kind of want to lay the ground here is I can't go into a lot of detail into about these matters, even though it's been a while I've exited Tesla. And also anything I tell about any company or any sort of entity is not necessarily me speaking on behalf of the entity. It's mainly my opinions, and I'll keep it fairly like limited information, respecting the confidentialities that I have with these companies, right? But when it comes to that specific question you asked about Tesla, let me make it more general and let me answer it in what I've seen in the manufacturing industry in general, right? In the automotive manufacturing industry. So obviously, to meet high demand in a very competitive space, in one of the most expensive places to make things in the world. We are not like Silicon Valley is not Detroit, where you can get like labor for relatively cheaper. Automation is a huge deal. It plays a very important role in making sure that we do things perfectly and also in a very economically viable manner, while keeping engineering and manufacturing close, very, very close, so that anything that comes up in manufacturing can be fed back into engineering, and we can have a tight feedback loop so that things can be fixed on the fly, right? So and this is not necessarily me making a statement about Tesla. This is a general statement that is out there that is even common sense wise true in general, right? So yeah, over there, what I did was figure out how to make cars faster, right? How do we push the cutting edge of robotics into the next level to make vehicles much more reliably, and also to improve the whole manufacturing process, and make sure that that issues down the line when the vehicle goes to the street is significantly less. The probability of that is significantly less. Now, in general, I think in general there is not much deeper understanding about the whole automotive, the car creation process in us when we use the cars, right? It just seems to be this invention or this thing that just seems to work, right? But I think understanding the details over there plays a huge role in appreciating what goes on in the automotive industry. Let me give you an example. So you might have heard. Have you heard of these things called recalls? So when companies put a car out, then after the fact, sometimes years later, they find out that, oh, there was actually an issue in a manufacturing process, and like probably 5,000 cars made in a certain day have this issue out there in the field, right? Which exposes the users to a lot of risk on the road. Now, this might be various different things. It might be either manufacturing related, where a worker on one shift did not he or she actually forgot to tighten one bolt to a certain torque value, right? It might be that kind of issue, or it might be an issue where the suppliers to a certain part that went into a vehicle had a bad thing happening in their factory. Now, this is like a second order dependency, right? Or maybe a sub supplier to that supplier, they had an issue, and then years later they figured out that that lot of parts that came from there had an issue. Now they need to trace back which cars had that lot. So now you use some sort of like a parent-child genealogy system where every part that goes into a vehicle is tracked against the vehicle serial number, right? And then you go in search of those vehicles, whom you sold it to, go in search of those vehicles, send a recall notice to them. They bring it into the store, the dealership, or whatever, depending on the company. And then they process the part. Either it's a software update or it's like a hardware change. And this is not just Tesla. This happens in Toyota, like in every car manufacturer that I can imagine. It happens, right? Suzuki, anyone. Yeah. So the point being, it's a fine balance. There is so much liability much after you have sold the car also, right? Even beyond the warranty period, throughout the life of the car. It might be like 50 years later they discover something and issue a recall that they are obliged to, or they're required to deal with by law. So the point here is, if there is no super advanced thought put into the vehicles while making that, one recall has a potential to bring the whole company down, because this is financial liability, right? You sell the car, you make a profit, and it's not like you're done. You're still responsible for the cars out there. And then you discover that there is an issue in the car, which 10 years later, fixing that in all the cars that you have sold means it might cost more than the amount you spent to make the car. Then your company is gone, right? That's simple economics there. So this is why most of us don't like necessarily appreciate this day to day, because it just works. But then there's thousands of things like these that go into automotive, that makes automation and extreme quality control important.
Yes, sir. It's really good to know like how each and every minute thing is very important in industries. So moving on to the next question. On a lighter note, Like, did you have any face-to-face, eye-to-eye interaction with the big man, Elon Musk? Any interesting experience?
So I mean, in general, I think he like within Tesla, he is a very he's not like necessarily a hidden CEO. He rolls, and this is out there in the press as well. He rolls his sleeves up, comes and works on the vehicles, and then he has this philosophy where if there's anything that went wrong, if it is like safety wise or anything like that, it should be like he comes over there, works on it, the next thing, and then make sure that he can operate on it and make it work safely, and then he puts people back over there if there is a safety incident, that kind of thing. But even in general, I think there's a high degree of responsibility, accountability, and passion that I saw in him, and like even when I saw him face to face. And it's evident in general. Nobody needs to necessarily say this in the products of the work that his companies have done. So I think it's incredible what someone can achieve in such a short period of time.
Yeah. And now moving on from Tesla to Lyft, what made you drive? What drove you to shift from a technical-oriented role at Tesla?
Yeah. So the main thing over there was I wanted to gain more holistic scope, right? There's so many things that I sort of learned at Tesla, but Tesla being a big company, there was there definitely was great mobility within Tesla, but I personally, to feed my career interests, I wanted to become more holistic and focus on not just controls engineering or electrical engineering, but also all these other disciplines of engineering, and help people help people cohesively apply that, and also learn myself at the same time. So I was trying to see how can I make that happen, and then Lyft was starting their self-driving group from scratch at that time, and I saw this as a great opportunity. Someone reached out to me from Lyft, and I saw this as a great opportunity to be like, okay, probably I should jump on this, and this is a chance for me to not necessarily work on vehicles when they are in a manufacturing sort of phase, but also like way early in the design phase, and that's the kind of enriching experience I got at Lyft. So it was awesome.
Yes, sir. Great to hear like how you ignored all the hype about Tesla and focused more on your vision in getting into product development. So the next question, like, what was the inspiration behind Resume Puppy? Some of us here are curious, like, why this name?
Yeah, so let me talk about the inspiration behind Resume Puppy. So I actually went. There's this. I have a co-founder at Resume Puppy called Anish Hegde, and we went to undergrad together in India, right? Since then, we've actually been in touch here and there. But then he came to the US in a couple years ago for his masters, and this was around the time he graduated. He got an internship in Yahoo, and then he moved to he moved to Silicon Valley, and we chatted for a long period of time. We were like, okay, how do we make sure, how do we produce value, right? And one of the things that we both faced during our respective job searches, and our respective job searches in the US were like 5 years apart, because I came just after my bachelor's and he worked in India and came here. But the experiences were the same. So we are like, okay, so nothing necessarily changed between like the past half decade in the whole job search market. And on what are the difficulties that we are facing, right? Like coming from a different culture, or like even in general, I think that's that resume part, which is, so that's all the work that you have done in a project and experience standpoint, and then there's all this great work that you can do in the industry, right? And between those two, lies your resume. So the question here is, how do you, like, it's clearly a weakest link in the chain or a breaking point, that if your resume is not great, then no matter how well your experiences are or your projects are, the probability of you making it to the other side is relatively low. So we were like, okay, how do we approach this problem, and what problems do people actually face? So we noticed that a lot of new grads anywhere in the world, they are confused about what a resume is supposed to do, how we are supposed to articulate ourselves in a resume, and all of that, right? So that's where we were like, okay, so what do? We can develop a technological solution, or we can invest heavily in doing manual reviews for people, right? And these were the two options that we were thinking of. So when it comes to manual reviews, the thing is, there's only so much we can do. We both can do in our bandwidth. We can't necessarily hit scale. We can't hit thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, right? So then we were like, oh, that's clearly not going to work. And Anish actually is a super brilliant, like, genius guy who has built a lot of products in the past. He's developed Android apps that's got like 150K downloads and stuff like that. So very impressive profile he comes with on the tech side. So that's where we were like, okay, now we actually need to build some tech product that can be used by anyone anywhere in the world. And COVID, when COVID hit, we got a lot of requests for resume reviews, and that sort of even went one up and solidified that fact that, oh, okay, we need to do this. And that's when we sort of started investing our time and efforts into creating a basic prototype of Resume Puppy. There's two fundamental things. One is, in a resume there is a format, and then there is the content, right? So our goal is to address both in a manner that is very simple and very intuitive to use for any person. And we want to make, like, high quality resume review and resume sort of revamp process very affordable and accessible to everyone. Because right now I think the system is relatively unfair, where people who can afford the high top end resume reviews, they get their resumes like flashy and get jobs, whereas people who are not able to afford such things, no matter the amount of ability that they have, it's an unfair advantage or disadvantage that other people, these people have. So yeah, this is the thing, and we actually we have addressed the format side fairly well, but we are now investing heavily on the AI aspect of a Resume Puppy, where, okay, we figure out, okay, how do we like a resume, like a manual resume reviewer, how do we try to emulate that in a very AI manner, so that the people put the right things on their resume from a content standpoint. And that's what we are like heavily invested towards right now.
Thank you, sir. I see how you're doing, like creating a level field for all those people
Yeah.
by Resume Puppy. And the next question: what does your role as technical program manager entail at Neuro?
So, in general at Neuro, I am responsible for building certain elements of the self-driving hardware that go into our autonomous delivery robots. So yeah, again, a lot of like super exciting stuff, cutting edge stuff that happens at Neuro, and I'm super excited to be a part of it. Yeah.
It's good to know like how you work on all the cutting edge technologies. The next question, like in the past, you have managed a startup, you built your profile for Einstein visa, and at the same time, you had a full-time job at Tesla. So how did a typical hardworking day in those times look like?
So Tesla did take a lot of my time, right? Like sometimes, and this is pretty. Tesla has a reputation for this, and it's great. It's great. Like if you need to make that kind of change in the world, you need to be able to put in all these like rigorous hours and be a part of that mission, right? So yeah, I think Tesla did take a lot of my time, but after work at Tesla, ad hoc, I found a lot of time as well because I would work late into the night and early in the mornings as well, plus on the weekends. So basically, I was looking for these time slots that. Okay, so if Tesla consumed, let's say, 60 hours of my week, then is there like 40 more hours I can spend doing something else, right? And that's the way I kind of looked at it. And then it seemed like there was sufficient enough time, open time spots over there, that I was like, okay, maybe I should like invest this rigorously into some project or some sort of idea. And that's where that's one thing led to the other, and that's how the other startup came up to be back then. Yeah.
Okay. So coming on to the last question, sir. So what do you have for us starting as professionals, career professionals who want to go into academics, or for young startup entrepreneurs?
Uh, the two main things over there that have helped me are stay scientific, right? Stay practical and stay scientific. Like dig down into things and see the nature of things, why they are the way they are. It's one. The second thing is everything that has been like pursued by anyone that you can see that have built great products and things like that is not a result of thinking like and just like an engineer or just like you know a specialist in a field. It's more like understanding the general nature of things and being able to understand that there's all these elements of human understanding that has evolved over centuries that we need to collectively apply towards a product. So let's say there's a phone, right? I'll give you a simple example on how being a great engineer will not necessarily mean that you'll make a great phone, right? So in order to build a phone that's at a very high level, there's a lot of nitty gritties here. But then if you are a hardware engineer, obviously if you do the hardware engineering right, there also needs to be a software layer on it. There has to be manufacturing that goes on it, right? Like how do you create like 2 million units of the phone, and then when you like do create 2 million units, do you go directly from like this design to 2 million units? No, you have several builds, you have several test methods where you use statistical methods to see, okay, how many of these tests passed, failed, and then you have several stages of it where you inject it into a subset of the population and then see how they like it. And if they don't like it, you roll it back, you roll changes, and then you keep pushing it out. You also look at, okay, if you want to manufacture this, there's a demand, like is there a demand of 2 million units, and if that demand is spread over 3 or 4 years, are you exposing yourself to a lot of risk by making 2 million units upfront? But then if you spread it out across those 2 years, then probably your unit cost will be higher because now the manufacturer will need to make smaller batches. Now you try to balance your unit cost, the difference in your unit cost with the risk that you'll potentially expose because some piece of hardware might be bad, or maybe there might be a pandemic and phone sales might, I don't know, go down, something like that. So are you ready to expose yourself to that risk, right? This involves a lot of risk analysis and calculations on that front. So it's not, there's no defined line between all these different areas, expertise of knowledge in these areas that go into a certain product, and I think we should treat it as so to become to be good entrepreneurs, right? Because There's no thin line. At some point in time, you can't raise your hand and say that was not my responsibility and it didn't happen. The buck stops there, basically. So a thorough understanding, even if you're not a specialist in these areas, an understanding that this is how to think about things is essential, because then you can go and leverage the expertise of people who are great at it.
So it was indeed a truly enlightening and motivating session. Thank you so much, sir, for these invaluable life lessons that you've shared with us. There is absolutely no doubts. Like in each of us, like we had lots of takeaways from this session. So as all good things come to an end, that's the end of our FAQ session today. So for the next 5 to 10 minutes, we have the forum open to the audience. So if you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask, or you can also type in the chat box, and we have sir to reply.
Yeah. While they type that, I have a couple things to also mention here. So at Resume Puppy, right? We believe we have this tool to help people, right? And even there's the basic version of this that is capable of doing a lot, that we intend to keep free forever, right? And we are looking for partnerships where we can help. Different types of partnership. Basically, it's like one is from Resume Puppy as a product itself to help colleges, and we have gotten a good amount of traction from colleges in India, especially towards our free enterprise kind of version. But we'll be happy to talk to your college as well to see if Resume Puppy can add value to the students of NIT Trichy in creating your resumes over there. So if there's like any interest like that in partnering with your college, that'll be super great, and I'm happy to talk about that offline, and feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to open up our free solution to help people at NIT Trichy. The second aspect of partnership over there is we are also looking. We have a pilot program already in the works, but we are looking at how can with Resume Puppy, how can we improve the way there's like academia and industry working together, right? So we at Resume Puppy, we have an acute shortage of resources all the time. The number of ideas are greater than the number of resources that we have. So this is where we are thinking, okay, so if there is a way we can like kind of guide students and have students work on the real world problems, then we'll open up this opportunity where people can actually work on Resume Puppy projects under a decent level of supervision, right? We have a plan for that, and how to roll that out. But then if there is any interest in NIT Trichy students or professors who are interested in participating in that program of Resume Puppy as well, where you can help us build cool stuff and also learn at the same time, we are open for that as well. So these are the two items. So feel free to reach out to me, let me know. I'm always I post a lot on LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me and follow me on LinkedIn.
Obviously, spread the word. A lot of things. I think we'll try to talk out with the process to see if there is any trap or anything which can be done here.
Yeah.
This is the first question from Viber. There are opportunity after graduation. Can you tell us how you streamline your interests?
So I think the answer to this question is basically how or why I chose control systems over others, right? And it's a fairly interesting concept there, because when you look at controls, and I believe everyone is in electrical engineering or related fields, right? Here, is that true?
So we have people from all backgrounds actually.
Okay, cool. No worries. I'll explain it to you in a relatively abstract manner. So, control systems is lies right in the edge of mathematics, physics, and engineering, right? Where you take real world problems, real world if you want to build an airplane, let's say you model it mathematically, see how that model works. Obviously, all models, obviously, no model will be perfect, but given the constraints you put on it, it might be perfect, right? Like an airplane cannot be a spacecraft, but both the spacecraft and an aircraft fly, right? But an airplane cannot be a spacecraft. So given that constraint, given the constraint that you're not making this equipment enter space, that unlocks a lot of potential to do a lot of innovation to achieve a certain result, right? And then there is a lot of controls that go into an aircraft is a classic controls problem. But not only that, there's other aspects of real life, real world, that you can apply control systems concepts to. For example, there's fisheries, right? Fisheries are an interesting problem because there's a certain number of fish, a certain amount of fish inside your reservoir, and how do you maintain that level of fish in a way that it is conducive for the fish to breed, and you get a lot of fish to fish in the same time, at the same time, right? If you overfish, then you reduce the number of fish in the reservoir, then you reduce breeding. But then if you underfish, then there is a population explosion over there, and then that is not conducive to their health as well, right? So this is a controls problem. So there are different variables that you deal with. There's all this mathematical modeling that happens, tweaking to that model, simulating what happens in different conditions, and then arriving at a point. And literally all of this is happening without you trying something in real world, right? It is this theoretical analysis that you're doing that is unlocked because of the power of computers, that you can imagine a world out there, what will happen if you do a certain set of actions without even doing the set of actions. And that really was super amazing to me, and that's why I was like, okay, yeah, this is a discipline that's applied everywhere, and I need to get into this.
Next, we have a question from Dheeraj. You can
Yes, sir.
unmute
Can you
yourself.
hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So I have two questions for you, sir. So one question is, considering that we all of us are in India, what do you think is the best way that we Indians can apply for an American company like Tesla? Because these companies don't come to our campus, but these are really big companies which we aspire for from our young age. So that's one question. And the second question will be, if we are looking to start a startup, will a capitalist country like America be a best option, or our home country like India would be the best option?
So answering your first question, which is coming to the United States, like applying to companies that are notionally doing advanced work in the US, right? So I think so. I have seen several places where within Tesla and like all of these other places that I worked at, where they are welcoming talent from around the world. It's not necessarily like it's basically that amount of talent that the person brings, the abilities that the person brings. So there's no and I'm again talking from a very Silicon Valley sort of mindset, not the whole, not in all of the US is probably like this, but if there is great talent, it has to come from anywhere, right? And that's the policy or philosophy that most companies that I have seen work with. But there is a barrier for people from certain countries, and that barrier is immigration. And this the companies can do little about in the short term. in the long term, yeah, there's like lobbying efforts and activist groups and things like that that might bring about change. But in the short term, right, and it depends on the country as well, where immigration is hard from certain countries. There's a lot of people immigrating from certain countries, so that's why there is governmental policies that make it very difficult to get visas, except for like get visas for direct work. And it's difficult I mean, sometimes it's difficult in a way that there is a path, but then the path requires extremely timely action from those companies, and also uncertainty, right? Okay, you apply for a visa, the companies apply for a visa, and then they wait for a random lottery to draw it, and then once the person is passed the lottery, then they have to wait like 8 to 10 months for the person to come and stuff like that. There are these sort of logistical nuances that I've seen impact people, and I think partly that's the main reason, right? For people who want to seek the experience and learn from an educational standpoint. That's the main reason a lot of people come in as students, and then they experience the industry from an educational standpoint as well. So yeah, that's what that is. I'm sorry, I forgot your second question.
So thank you, sir. So the second question was, if I'm looking to start a startup company, would it be a better option? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't like I have been closely watching the progress of startups in India, and the way India has evolved this whole ecosystem, right? Obviously, like in any place, not most of those companies do not succeed. But then, like the ones that actually have a great team, have a great product market fit, have a great understanding of the way they'll sell their product and or service, and add value to society, right? Add value to society, not in a philanthropic sense, but more in a what value are you generating to people that are using your product, right? From this standpoint, I've seen I think the growth curve in India has been immense. So I don't have any reason to say that one has to come to the US to do these things. It is equally possible today, I think, in this day and age, because especially the internet has made it a huge sort of unifying factor, right? And in Indian data costs are or I think at least an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude less than the cost of internet in the US. So there's a lot of like leverage and advantage that people have in India as well, that most of us don't necessarily recognize. So basically, I think there's more than we think we have. To answer the question, I don't think it's necessary, absolutely necessary,
Sure.
that you need to come here. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your answer, sir. That was great.
Yeah.
So we have one more, so we have final 2 to 3 more questions, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
So
go.
we have one question from Dave MS. What is your first company you joined? Could you talk about something about that?
Yeah, so I worked for a couple. Before graduation, I started working for this company called Electronics Engineering in Atlanta, in Georgia. What they did was they were like a subcontractor to these big sorting system companies, right? Like UPS and FedEx and things like that. They had a lot of equipment that did package sorting and mostly industrial automation, but in the material handling space. So I started by doing electrical design and control systems for them. Then I moved to this company called Container Automation Systems, that is also in Atlanta, Georgia. Over there, I led the whole controls effort. That was a super enriching experience for me, because right out of college, I was given a great opportunity to work over there on not just work, but also like be a pivotal part of something and not just a module feeding into a big thing. And I learned a lot over there. Yeah, that's and they made equipment that went into the packaging industry. Like for example, peanut butter jars, right? All these plastic jars. Once they are made from the blow molder, the plastic blow molder, how do you process them downstream from there? Is the problem that we were tackling and making a robotic and semi-robotic equipment that made that happen.
That's nice. Seems interesting. The next question we have from Rahul Kumar. How to identify potential market needs for startups?
Yeah, there's several books and like product management or market discovery kind of literature out there that you can refer. But in general, what I can say super quick is I feel like it's so obviously there should be a pain that someone is feeling, right? And most of these a lot of startups come from a pain that the founders themselves have felt, right? So if you feel in everyday life from a founder standpoint, if you feel that there so there's a few reasons why certain problems exist that you can solve, right? And one of the easiest ways to identify that, especially, or one of the easiest things that will, I think, in my opinion, unlock a lot of opportunity is the advent of AI. So, for example, let's say there was the horse driving the cart, right? Back in the day, um, and Henry Ford did not necessarily think of it from a horse driving the cart standpoint. What he thought was, okay, so basically I need to make something go faster than this, right? And up until that point, there was just the horse, there was the cart. Maybe you optimize a little bit in the design of the cart. Maybe you feed the horse some better stuff and it'll get stronger. And that was the mindset in which progress was being made, right? But then along that period of time, what also evolved was industrial revolution, right? And the horse and the cart was probably like a few decades before that also, probably a century or two. But what happened in parallel was also the industrial revolution, where a lot of mechanical engineering investment was done to do great stuff in industries, right? To make mass scale goods, productize things, mass manufacturing, all of these things took rise, and that gave rise to a lot of innovation in the mechanical engineering side. How do we mine fuels? How do we burn fuels? How do we create transform the chemical energy in fuels to mechanical energy and move things, plus also make things, right? It was driven around making things. But at the same time, there's so much advances in mechanical engineering that had come through that was not realized. That potential was not realized in all these other areas it could be applied to. And Henry Ford and all these other people who have pioneered the automobile, right? They were basically like, okay, so there's this technology that has gained traction over there. Why can't I bring it here and then create something that does things more than an order of magnitude better than the current solution? It's mainly taking a technology which has evolved for some other reason into something else, and building on top of that. So in this day and age, what I see is the way artificial intelligence is progressing. Even now, it's in its extreme infancy. But what I see is you can see things like conversational AI. You can see let's say Google Maps or Google Assistant, right? You can see the way they were doing the rule based kind of if else if this is the question, answer this kind of thing. Versus now, it leverages these advances in AI to make it more specific and more automated, right? And this has and there's several industries that are following the old approach. AI is making its way into the travel booking industry. It's making its way into a lot of like these other industries. Resume Puppy being leveraging it for resumes. But I think whenever there is a technological shift like this, there is this old way of doing things that can be combined with this new technology that has, is taking shape, to incorporate that. Similar, in the travel booking industry, previous to before the internet, people were going to the physical travels and they used to issue these physical sort of paper-based tickets and stuff like that. And what changed there? Why can we do it now online? The same result, but online, and convenient, right? Because there was this new creation of the internet, right? And internet came into that industry and changed it. So there's these fusions that keep happening, and looking for things that you can do, that you can fuse an existing advanced industry, advanced concept in another industry, is, I think, the easiest way to bring efficiency in the way we do things. And I think this is a really powerful way of thinking about, okay, how do I reimagine things with whatever has advanced until now, from a technological sense. Sorry, it was a long response, but this is a topic I'm super passionate about. So
Okay, it was really insightful, sir. The next question we have from Meenakshi. How did you divide your time for startups while working in a big company like Tesla?
yeah, I think this question is already answered. Mainly, I looked at how many hours do I have per day? How many hours do I have per week? How many hours do I necessarily devote to Tesla? And then after that, okay, how can I spend the remaining amount of time in a very productive manner behind whatever I'm doing?
Okay. We have a question from Shashwat. What is the scope of venturing into a techno-managerial role after an MS in control? Are there good job opportunities in finance or management that require a control and optimization background?
I can tell you that there are a lot of control systems engineers working on Wall Street in the stock exchange, right? What they model financial markets, and they predict, okay, what's the right price to go in and what's the right price to get out, when might be a fall be coming. They do a lot of modeling around that, and they also do a lot of algorithm creation around that. So I think there's immense scope in of control systems in finance. Yeah.
Okay. The last question for today, from Shashwat again. What is the future of control engineering in terms of job prospects? What all kind of relevant jobs can you get into after an MS in control? Is the ML and AI revolution biting off control and engulfing it?
So I think control systems will be needed, if not more, right? Like, for example, probably 10 years ago, when self-driving cars were like very, 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 very early. Even now they are like super early in what they're, in their technologies. But back then, control systems had like greater application in in like defense, space, aviation, these kinds of places. It did have implementations in automotive as well, but in a more mechanical sense. Now, with the advent of EVs and autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and everything, control systems is more and more necessary when it comes to autonomous control of vehicles, self-driving vehicles, right? So I think control systems, the need for this, by that definition, I think will keep increasing, because there's a lot of automation coming in a lot of spaces. And how do you automate things? By first knowing how to control things, right? And yeah, that is making me think there's a lot of areas that it will help unlock.
That's great, sir. Personally, I enjoyed this session. It was great having you. Now over to the census treasurer to take up and give the vote of thanks.
Hello, Mr. Simon. I'm going to be honest with you. This session was amazing. It was really insightful. And I'm sure a lot of us who attended also feel the same way. So I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your, your very busy schedule and giving us a slot. And thank you so much. And I would also like to thank all the faculties without whose continuous support and guidance we would not have been able to do this and have this session. And I would like to thank the team who worked so hard to make sure this event went off without a hitch. From the PR team who handled the registrations to the publicity team who made sure everyone knew about the event, and especially last but not the least, the webinar team who had to contact him. They've set up the list of questions, they contacted the registrants, they got a list of questions from them, and they compiled a list of questions to make sure all of you guys have your questions cleared. And lastly but not the least, without the people without whom this would not have been possible, the participants. Even though this session was a bit late in Indian Standard Time, a lot of you turned up, and out of the 100 plus registrations, I'm very glad to see that almost 50 people are here right now at 10:30 p.m. listening to him. So that shows how important and how useful your influence is. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we'll take it from there.
Sure, definitely.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Yep.